Hello and welcome to the video. This is my build out and flight review of this thing here. This is the new AtomRC Penguin. Slightly weird name, slightly weird looking aircraft, but I've been fascinated to see how it actually flew. The stuff on the website from AtomRC looks incredibly interesting and seems to say that it's pretty much good at everything. Will it be that good? Well, we're about to find out. First of all, before I get into the flying footage, links down below, time codes, etc. Let me talk about a few things about the build on this. The build has been incredibly easy and straightforward. There's no real drama at all. This was a couple of hours from start to finish, including upgrading INAV. I have glued in the little covers that go over the GPS on the other side. I haven't used the other side for anything. It's just the smallest little dab of Yoo-hoo port just to make sure that those don't pop off and get lost. I've lost a few covers on AtomRC models where I haven't done that little bit of Yoo-hoo port to keep them safe. I've installed a Walksnail version 1 into this nose. This is a fantastic little design. The way it goes in on a tray, slides into the back, the way that the camera has adapters in the box for the different size cameras so you can fit them in, also has kind of guides for the antennas to stick out the top, so whether or not you're a Walksnail, a DJI or a HD0 pilot, it's all thought out, and it does seem to be pretty rigid too. This is a great design. I really hope that we see something like this appear on the front of the AtomRC Dolphin. That would be a really nice addition. Maybe a Dolphin Pro with some of the cool things that are on this model. I've used S-Bus to connect into the flight controller with this particular F405 AtomRC flight controller that's applied. I'm using one of my old X8R receivers that I've got loads of from when I used to do a lot of flying of FreeSky. I've mounted the antennas here in a V configuration inside of the V-tail itself, just so that they're slightly more protected if it flips over on a landing, and the S-Bus connection works absolutely fine. It plugs in here on the flight controller. If you're not using that, then you're going to use the UART2 pins, which are going to allow you to connect via CRSF for something like Express LRS or Crossfire. Personally, I would probably, if you're building yours, don't do what I've done here with S-Bus. I'd use Express LRS. Why? Well, the flight controllers that AtomRC are currently making, the one in this one, the Dolphin and the Swordfish, all have an issue talking smart port. So if you have something like an old X8R like I'm using here and you want smart port to get the telemetry down to your radio, it won't work. You have to use the smart port inverter hack. I have fed back that that's not great to AtomRC. Who knows if it'll change it. However, with Express LRS and a CRSF connection, the telemetry works absolutely beautifully, and the antennas are a little bit shorter and easier to sight too. I would have preferred the flight controller to be mounted slightly forward to give a little bit more room behind for things like larger receivers. There is absolutely room in there, and also on mine I found that the little USB buzzer board, the auxiliary one that sits at the side, had actually been installed over the top of the port that the cable comes through from the wing into the body. So that's not great. AtomRC, if you're watching this, try and put the flight controller as far forward as it will fit. That will give more room behind it for other stuff if pilots want to add that. But also it's closer to the central gravity. The central gravity is really far forward on here. If I turn it over, there's the CG marks, so it's kind of almost in line with the tip of the wing. That means that central gravity is kind of here-ish. The flight controller is quite a way back from that, which although works fine, you know, I'd prefer it a little bit closer. I have flashed this up to INAV 6.1.1, which is the latest at the time of recording. There are some significant advantages to that. Things like the AHRS stuff is fixed. There are some improvements to lots of different tweaks. So I would go and update it. I've used exactly the same process as I've used in this video here to update the AtomRC Dolphin that comes with the same flight controller. Copied over things like the configuration file for the accelerometer calibration and went through and did all the settings. I am going to put a link down below to my diff all here. I think personally it's a slightly better one. Things like the AHRS calculation is set for the right setting for a fixed wing. It wasn't by default. I do wish that manufacturers like this would just put it in the hands of an experienced pilot and just let them check the settings out before they ship it. But personally, I think that works better for me. Caution, if you are going to use that file, be aware I like to have the props running as soon as I arm it in auto launch. Auto launch for me is always permanently enabled, so as soon as I launch it, as you'll see in a moment, just throw it into the air and away it goes. I have also turned on the brake for both the props. The props do come down quite a way below the bottom of the model, so there is a chance they're going to hit the ground. So I've turned on the brake for both of them. Just downloaded BL Heli Suite. I have a video that explains how to do that. I'll put a link down below if you've never done it before. I think that would have been quite nice to be set up from the factory as well. The way that it's set up is that the props are kind of turning out rather than turning in. But again, with BL Heli Suite, you could change that around. But you can also get it into the ESCs if you want to swap cables, but you don't have to do it. If you're already talking to it via BL Heli Suite to put your brake on, do whatever floats your boat. The other adaptation that you might have spotted has turned it round is here. I have added 2 strips of wet and dry sandpaper. Just use U-Hoo pour to connect them here on the bottom. That is the place that you hold it to throw it, and I like to have some kind of grip so that it doesn't slip out of my hands. It's kind of in line with the CG point, so it's a naturally balanced when you chuck it. Talking about central gravity, because the CG is about here, and it is quite heavily weighted, all the electronics are behind the central gravity, and it's got a tail that sticks out quite a way too. Even if you do put a HD system in the nose, there is a massive amount of room in here to put a battery. It will take a very big battery. Somebody asked me whether or not it would take 18650s. Someone else asked me if it would take 21700s. Someone asked me if it would take a 3000 milliamp hour LiPo. The answer is, for 4S, yes to all of those things. If I am flying it with the standard 2200 that I tend to fly with a lot, it's about 180 grams, it has to be about a centimetre from the front nose in order to get it to balance. If, however, I get my big 4200 milliamp hour 21700 lithium ion pack, then it kind of sits in the middle. So there is an awful lot of capacity in here in this big battery bay for you to carry quite a lot of battery if you are interested in kind of extending the flight time. Last comment I'll make, the default throws as it comes set up. In INAV, interestingly, they've throttled back the rates are only 80%, not 100%. But even at 80%, the throws are huge. And I'm going to show you the footage now. We'll fly it like it is supplied. It's probably about twice the throw that I would personally set up on a model like this. But let's see how acrobatic that makes it. So hopefully that's been interesting. That's how it's all built out. It's particularly tricky. It's almost ready from the factory. Again, diff all down below, but it was a nice fun build. Only a couple of hours. One of the nicest things for me was actually putting the walk snell unit in here and not having to cut things and mess about and destroy the nose of the plane in order to fit my FPV equipment. Right, enough waffling. Let's get to the field and let's talk about what it flies like and go through the standard rating system. A quick update though before we do the flying footage and I talk about what it's like to fly. I have been in touch with AtomRC and expressed my concerns about the excessive throws that I've just shown in the video, and they have had the same feedback from other pilots as well, and they are going to be reducing the throws on the models that they ship. Now, the aileron, as we saw before, was 23mm travel. The elevator was a whopping 28mm, measured at the end of the elevator, that little pointed tip. What I've done is I have kept the throws in INAV at 80%. Gives me a little bit more headroom if I think we need it. I've reduced the elevator travel down to about 19mm from 28 by moving it into the middle hole on the servo horn, and I've also done the same thing with the ailerons. I've moved it to the fourth hole down, and that has taken the throw from 23 to 16mm. Now both of those 16mm aileron throw and 19mm elevator throw should still be lots for a plane like this, but I'm going to fly it on those, so let's see how it goes. So let's go through the headlines before I get into the individual scores. There is a huge amount of static thrust from those twin props, making hand launching very easy, and that thrust also means that you can climb aggressively without any problem at all. At about a third throttle, you will get about 30 miles an hour out of it, but only pulling a tiddly 3.5 amps. So that's probably the area you want to be in if you want maximum endurance. 50% throttle is going to get you up to about 46 miles an hour, but that's going to increase your amp draw to about 8 amps, and that's more the range that I tend to be flying it in, kind of the 40 to 50% throttle. And there is a 2-degree offset that I put in INAV, which seems to be spot on. I would put that as your fixed wing offset. That means that it isn't gaining or losing height when it's flying around. The roll rate with the lower throws that I've just demonstrated are still crisp and responsive. There's a nice roll rate, and the pitch is still a little aggressive with the movement that's out there. It's a very big elevator, and the normal flying 1000 milliamp hours from the battery was used up in about 5.5 to 6 minutes. Flying at a third throttle would probably double that, so you'd use about 1000 milliamp hours every 10 to 12 minutes if you are flying at the slower speeds. Full speed, however, will get you up to 72 miles an hour from the testing that we've done here on average, and the full speed amps is around 33 to 35 amps, so not ridiculous for a little plane like this. It is very floaty and capable of gliding as well as flying at about 72 miles an hour, so it's easy to land. It does look a lot less goofy in the air and reminds me of things like the Quinjet from things like the Avengers movies. It looks a lot less weird when it's zipping through the sky than it does when I first saw it when I opened the box. In terms of the scores, how does it do? Well, slow speed, it gets a really good score for this. It's 4.5 stars. It can easily fly below 50 miles an hour, probably more like about 10, maybe a little bit less. It's very floaty and capable of gliding without issue, makes landing very, very easy, and also it means that you can get to altitude, cut the motors, and just poodle around and soar about too, again, if you want to extend your flight time. High speed, it only gets 1 star. It can fly faster than 70 miles an hour, but only just. But that's a nice speed envelope going from about 10 to 70, 72 miles an hour. It's not a speed demon. If you want a speed demon, there's probably other better models about. Efficiency gets a whopping 5 stars. It will fit a 21700 pack in the nose. That will give you 4200 milliamp hours. If you are flying very carefully and you're only using up 1000 milliamp hours every 10 to 12 minutes, then you're easily going to get over 40 minutes with this. So if you are careful and you are taking your time, then you're going to get 40 minutes. If you're flying it a bit more like you stole it, then you're going to get about 20-25 minutes with a lithium ion pack of that size. Noise is very quiet. Those are nice big 6-inch props, and you can only hear it when it's very close in. Anything more than about 80-100 feet away, you're struggling to hear it even at high throttle. Toughness, I'm only giving it 4 stars, and that is because I don't want to give it 5 stars yet, as I'm still not convinced how the nose will survive longer term. So far so good. With all the landings that we've had, there are no issues at all, apart from a bit of scoring at the bottom from some of the mud that it's landed in. However, it does like to shovel in mud and grass into all those nose openings where the HT system is, so at the end of a flight we're having to upend it and kind of pat its back like we're burping a small child for it to then drop out all of the rubbish that it's hoovered up in that nose. Acrobatics gets a very respectable 4 stars. It's nice and stable in normal flight, but it absolutely is able to perform loops and rolls with lots of headroom for crazy throws and lots of thrust, make it a lot of fun. I think the control surface movement that I've got is much better for general flying. I think those higher rates would be useful if you want to zip around trees and fly it more like a quadcopter. Room inside gets a good score too, 4.5 stars. There's room for all the pieces inside with room to spare for HD FPV and that fantastic nose design, but it is a little bit tight for any more PCBs. It would be nice if AtomRC mounted the flight controller a little bit further forward towards the centre of gravity. That potentially would also help give a little bit more room behind for things like receivers, RC switches and those things too. Travel and breakdown almost gets 5 stars, it gets 4.5, breaks down into smaller parts without the need for tools, but the main body remains very bulky, stopping it being backpackable, which is why it won't get the full 5 stars. However, you can take the wings off without undoing the servo connections into the flight controller, and it does pass the MX5 boot test. It will fit, but only just because the carbon fibre rod is still in there. In terms of the settings for INAV, let's connect and have a very quick look at what changed. In terms of the outputs, let's see what it trimmed the outputs to. A little bit of trimming, but not much at all actually. The default positions as it is supplied are pretty close, so that is good to see. We don't need lots of reflex or up elevator for it to be stable. If we go into PID tuning, look at the rates in Expo after the auto tunes here. Roll rate is 310 degrees per second, which is a respectable number. Pitch is about 130. That's about what I'd expect. Link down below for a diff all if you want to have a look at how I had mine set up, or maybe copy that into your version when you get it. In summary, this is a fab all-rounder. The only thing it doesn't excel at is flying at high speeds, 80, 90, 100 miles an hour. It flies more like the AtomRC Dolphin, but with the twin power that gives you loads of thrust like the AtomRC Swordfish. This is a great place to put your FPV camera and setup. I just wish it broke down into smaller pieces for transport and storage. This one gets the Painless 360 seal of approval. This is going to go into my regular flying pile, and I'm going to stick one of my Painless Pill stickers on it and claim it as mine. So hopefully that's been useful, and now you can see how it performs. Again, it is a bit of an odd looker, but actually I'm willing to forgive that for the way that it flies. Thank you for watching the video. If you watch my videos and find them useful, then please take a moment to hit the like and subscribe button. It helps the channel a lot. If you really like what I'm doing here, you can become a Patreon and support the time I spend helping others and get access to lots of exclusive benefits. Link is in the video description. Remember that all the videos on the channel are organized into playlists, so you can easily use those playlists to find all the videos on a subject that you are interested in. Add Painless 360 to your searches on Google and YouTube, and it'll help you find my content for any particular topic. Thanks again for watching, and as always, happy flying.